I became involved in this project through a phone call that Michael gave me. We talked. I was in France working there, and it was actually a really good place to be because there is a lot of werewolf culture over there, and Michael told me in very few sentences what was this about. And at that moment I was already completely convinced of being part of this, and little by little, the more we talked, the more we sort of engaged on what was being constructed, and what was the story, and the storyline and the premises and everything started to get very, started to construct the character, to build the character, and at the same time I started to investigate even more about werewolves in different parts of the world, and that started to become a kind of a ground, like a solid ground on where to build this character. So that's how I got really involved, and by the time we started to rehearse, I was already kind of completely, fully in it, fully involved in it. There's many things that I like about playing Jack Russell, and amongst the many different angles. I mean, this part of, apart from the obvious of being half human, half monster, this kind of, trying to establish this border between both. One of the things I like a lot is that it's a character that has lived many, many years. I think that in itself sets the scale, the musical scale on which this character talks and moves and kind of engages with the present. Somebody that has lived 300, 400 years maybe has seen a lot, and that's something that sparks my curiosity, and at the same time gives me an angle, a very specific angle on how to play this character, but also it just keeps me, it like strikes my curiosity as well in terms of where this can go. It can lead to many places. Those are the things that the fact that the film is in black and white is in itself a starting point on how we engage looking at this at Werewolf by Night, because in horror is more important what you don't see and what you don't hear than what you see and what you hear. It's there is that kind of immediate engagement of trying to construct everything that you see in the screen. So it leads a lot to the imagination. That's why, I mean, black and white has been so such a there's been such a conflict in a sense with the use of black and white, because it's very powerful, and it leads a lot. It engages and demands a lot from the viewer to construct what goes on, what happens there. What color would it been? We'd never know. So there is something very, very interesting about that, and there's many things about the specific rules and the kind of the stylization and the operistic kind of stylization that the horror genre kind of brings, that as an actor it's good not to be aware of. It's good to just to listen and to kind of be comfortable with the silences and the kind of like the tension build up, but then you see the result. So there's something fantastic about this, I mean, as well. It's that we're always in a fine line, not knowing what really are we doing. Sometimes we will see the result, and that's how analog films were made. They were shot, and then they would see how they were made, how everything comes up. So that's something that was very, very fun to do, and it's nice not to have all the certainties as well, because I mean, the creative process, it's good to try things without the certainty if they're good or bad. No, and later we will see. Michael Giacchino is I got to know this after we were doing this project, that his first approach was as a filmmaker, and he started to make music as a filmmaker, and now maybe there is a hybrid between him as a person that makes music for films, or as a musician, into the world of him directing, and so it's interesting. He's got a very interesting point of view, and it's interesting to see how his kind of language and kind of authorship evolves as well as a filmmaker. He wants to keep directing, I suppose, I hope, and it would be interesting to see where this leads. How was it like to work with Laura and Harriet? Well, I mean, they are incredible. They are such great actresses, and they really jump right into the fantasy of this world. I mean, it's great to have to work with actors that really enjoy the game that we're playing, and they're definitely the type of actors that really just love to play with all these elements, and they went really for it. So it was such a relief, and great, and encouraging, and also I don't know, just very tender as well, the way that we all got interested in a project like this.
The two things that most attracted me to this project were MCU and Halloween. So I was a massive fan of the MCU films. I'd seen most of them, I think, before I kind of got the call about this character. And then, of course, I went and caught up on all the other ones as well that I hadn't seen. And, I'm a huge fan. So I really would have been involved in anything that they wanted me to do in that world. But the added bonus of it being a Halloween special, which I am just the biggest Halloween fan in the world. My whole family has always found Halloween incredibly important, and it's big in my household. So I knew that I was kind of going to get to combine two things that I really loved, and there was no way I was going to say no. Elsa is a monster hunter. She grew up being trained in that by her father, Ulysses Bloodstone, who is this revered ancient monster hunter. And we find her at a point now where she is kind of between two worlds. She doesn't know whether she still wants to be involved in that, and she has dissociated from her family and her father and all of that world for quite some time, and is now coming back to it and is trying to find herself within that context, I think. And so that's a really relatable aspect of her character to me, because I think that as we all grow up and mature, we find ourselves in these positions sometimes where we've got to, straddle who we were and who we want to be, and we're trying to figure out how to get there. So I thought that brought along a lot of vulnerability to her, and a lot of humanity that I was really interested in exploring. Her look is very practical. She is in leather and jeans and boots and gear that she can go on a monster hunt in. And I loved that whole thing because it was very practical. I was able to really move in it. It was, I was able to do my stunts, and it was really comfortable. And I think my favorite thing about her are the little streaks of color that I have in my hair. I wanted to keep them, but I wasn't able to. This being my first MCU project, the thing that I most enjoyed was that it felt really collaborative and really creative, and actually kind of like we were making a little independent movie that, just a passion project. So I often forgot that it was within the context of this huge universe that I've been a fan of. And that was really unexpected to me, because I know that the way all of these characters and stories and everything all link up, I thought that everything would be a lot stricter, and yet it still felt like a really artistic, creative process. And that for an actor is just really, it's a dream. So I really enjoyed the whole thing of being able to develop this character, be able to work through the scenes and be able to change little bits, and things were, constantly in flux. And that just made it feel like we were, getting to be really creative, and we had a great time with it. We had a surprising amount of fun as a cast on that set for something that we were filming that was really quite dark and scary, and we just had a huge number of laughs. I mean, we had a lot of scenes, or good few scenes, where it was all of the cast in together, particularly towards the beginning of the shoot, and so we'd all be there just feeling kind of like we were part of something really special, and we just laughed a lot. Everybody was really lovely to get along with, and I especially adored working with Gael, who plays Jack. We had, I think we developed a really good rapport, and were able to kind of support each other through the scenes, and he's such an amazing actor. So yeah, it was a bit of a dream. Michael Giacchino is incredibly special as a director. I think that he was able to bring such a fun and kind of what felt like a low pressure situation to something that I'm sure must have felt very highly pressured. It felt really experimental and really creative and really free. And we were all welcome to collaborate and come with our ideas and come with, what we wanted to bring personally to the project. So I think to be able to create that atmosphere and at the same time produce this tiny, well-told, short story, and tell that story so beautifully in the beats of it is such a skill. And I think that the fact that he has a background as a hugely successful composer really shows in the kind of the musicality and the rhythm that he brings to telling that story really beautifully. I think that it just plays out perfectly, and I think that is specifically because of those skills he has. The fact that we were going to get to be on practically built sets was a really big attraction for me in doing the project. It was something that Michael told me about whenever I first had a conversation with him, and he told me that he wanted, like in those old 30s, 40s horror movies, he wanted everything to be there and real and tangible. And that was a really big draw for me, because me coming from a theater background means that that's very what I'm used to. I'm used to being able to look actors in the eye. I'm used to be able to touch everything around me, to use the sets. And that's the kind of, it's the kind of acting that I like to do. So I was thrilled to hear that, and getting on those sets, it was amazing, because, we had this big maze set, and it was that, we all kept getting lost in it, and, you'd put down your water bottle, and then you'd finish a scene and go back to get it, and you'd realize that you've no idea which end of the space it was at. And we were all just always, walking around trying to find where we were supposed to be. So, again, it adds to the whole fun of the thing, but it really made performing in those spaces so much more fulfilling. I think what's in store for viewers whenever they watch the special is scary, thrilling, vintage horror, but at the same time there is real heart to the story. The humanity, I think, of the characters is what is the linchpin of the whole thing. And I think that particularly the connection between Jack and Elsa grounds it in a real humanity that I think is really beautifully told. So yes, it's horror and it's scary, and I hope that people are scared by it, but I also hope that they come away moved by it.
Getting to do Werewolf by Night is perfect for me because I loved it as a kid. I still have my comics that I bought when I was 9 years old, 8 years old. I still have those. So when I was having this conversation with Kevin Feige about directing, and he was like, well, what would you want to do? And I'm like, Werewolf by Night, of course. And he was just like, wait, what? And I was like, yes, I love that. So for me, it's perfect, not only for that reason, but also because every Saturday while I was growing up, my brother and I would be in front of that television watching monster movies. That's what we did. That's what we lived on. That's what I grew up with. And I love them so much. And I love them because they are not just scary and thrilling and all of that, but they're emotional too. And they're about people with problems that need help. And I was always upset when the monsters were being chased and killed and all of that, because I kept thinking like, wait a minute, nobody wants to be a monster. These are people that need help and assistance. Why aren't you, So there was a great empathy I had for them. And I thought that there would be an interesting track we could take with this story, which delved into that area of the story. I wanted Werewolf by Night to simply be, first and foremost, a love letter to all of those movies I watched growing up and loved. The Universal horror movies, the Hammer films, the Godzilla movies, Ultraman, King Kong, Planet of the Apes, Poltergeist. All of this stuff to me was what I loved. And what I loved about most of them was that they had a heart to them. they understood what humanity was. They understood what empathy was. And I wanted this to be a reflection of that. You know, more than anything else, I wanted it to be a reflection of that idea of what it means to look someone in the eye and try to understand them and understand what is going on behind them, as opposed to just labeling them as a monster and wanting to destroy them. To me, I don't know, there's too much of that in our world as it is, and I wanted to go the other way with it. Well, we're gonna find out, aren't we? Jack Russell fits into the MCU timeline just like everyone else is. Like, just because it's in black and white, just because it's old, doesn't mean it's not current. And he is existing alongside of everyone else we know and love in the MCU right now. But we chose to just tell this story of one night in the life of Jack and Elsa. That's really what I wanted to do, just tell the story of one night in the life of Jack and Elsa, not get caught up in how he's connected here or how he's going to be connected there. We'll find out at some point, but let's just worry about this right now. A film like Werewolf by Night being in black and white, feeling like it's hearkening back to those films of old days of the 30s that we all grew up on. I feel like it gave us license to push a little further into the horror realm that maybe we would have been able to had it been just full on color in your face. You know, I think at every step of the way, whenever I wanted to do something that might have been like completely off from what they normally do in these films, like they backed me. They were like, go for it, do it. If that's what you want to do, do it. No one told me no. And I have to say that I'm very grateful for that, because I feel like we were able to create an experience for the audience that is different, that is unique, and something hopefully refreshing and fun for them to experience on, you know, around the time of Halloween. The overall tone of Werewolf by Night is one, at its center, it's got a huge heart. You know, it's got a huge heart. And that to me is always the most important thing of any story. What are you trying to say? And how are you saying it through your characters, you know? And I wanted it to be something where people would relate to each of the characters and understand why they're doing what they're doing, and not be so, you know, to be little kitschy, not to be so black and white with the story, to have layers, and to delve deeper and understand what it is like to have an issue or a problem that you need help with. You know, what it is like, what does family mean to these characters? You know, family is a big central theme in this story. And what does that mean to them? And that's not something you normally delve into in a werewolf movie, or in it. Usually it's about just the scare and the horror of what's happening. But I wanted to kind of try and go a little deeper with that and make these characters something other than two-dimensional. The thing about horror movies is what you don't see is always far scarier than what you do see. And when you're dealing with something like the shadow of something, that to me instills much more fear than if I were just to show you the thing that was creating that shadow, because your brain is doing all that extra work filling in what it is that you think you're seeing or what it could be. And every time you do that in a movie, I tell you that the scariest movies I have seen are the ones that don't show that much. And the classic example that we always go back to is Jaws, right? The less you saw of that shark, the more afraid you were. All you needed to hear was the music, or see a shadow underneath the water, or just sense that something was there, and you were suddenly terrified. So for me, less is more. The cast of Werewolf by Night, I feel like I hit the jackpot. There was only one person in my mind who I wanted from day one to play Jack in this, and that was Gael Garcia Barnell. And he and I had worked together on Coco prior to this, so I did get to know him a little bit. And it was, you know, I remember when I first started thinking about this, I was like, that was it. That was the only person I wanted, because he has a huge heart. He's very empathetic. And what you see is what you get. Like, he is a really decent, good person. And I wanted this character to embody that, you know? And I thought, if he says no to this, I have no idea who number 2 is going to be on this list. And thankfully, he didn't say no. And it was the very similar thing with Laura Donnelly. Like, you know, when you're looking for somebody to play Elsa, you know, someone who can be strong, who can be vulnerable, who can also be smart, who can be, and also be an incredible action hero. Like, that's a tough, bill to fill. And I, as soon as I saw her in the Nevers, I was like, that's her. There she is. That's Elsa right there. That's Elsa Bloodstone. And they set us up with a meeting, and I loved her instantly. I loved her, and I loved working with her. She's brilliant. She can do it all, and she's hilarious, and just everything you want in an actor. So that was great. And then, of course, for the character of Verussa, I mean, Harriet Sansom Harris killed it. I could tell you, like, on set, watching her work, I was like, the editor, Jeff Ford, and I would be on set watching as we were doing takes, and I would just be laughing and trying to hold back, because she was so good and so arch and so over the top in the best way possible without being over the top. She brought something to the role that felt so classic horror movie to me. And I will forever feel lucky to have had her in this film. So, and then the rest of the cast just filled it out from there. And we got lucky on every single person, which just like, and just good people too. Good people. What I hope people will experience when they watch Werewolf by Night is, well, let me tell you this. First day of shooting, I sat the entire cast in a big circle on the set. We made everyone else leave. Everyone left the building, and it was just me and the cast. We sat in a circle, and I said, okay, I'm going to go around. Let's introduce each other, because, no one knew each other. Whenever these things are coming together, most actors don't know each other already. I said, let's introduce ourselves. But after we introduce ourselves, you have to tell us a story of something that scared you as a kid. And everyone went around and told something, a movie that they saw, that they still can feel how scared they were when they think of it. And everyone went around, told their version of that. And when it came back around to me, I said, okay, that's what we're here to do. We are here to create that scary moment for someone out there in the world today. We want to do that so that when they grow up, they're going to say, you know what scared me as a kid? Oh, the first time I sat down and watched Werewolf by Night. Like, I want to create that feeling of watching something that sticks with you forever, because I still have my list of things that I saw as a kid, and they still affect me to this day. And not in a sadistic way, but in a fun, remembering how fun it is to be scared sometimes. There's a fun in it that you can do. If you do it right, it can be very fun, but it'll stick with you. So if I had one wish for this, it would be to create that moment for the audience.
At Marvel Studios, we're big fans of network TV specials from back in the day, and they can range, we're a half hour to an hour special thing that would come on television. Maybe it was a special time each week, maybe a special time each year. And we had noticed that we hadn't seen too many recently. So when we were thinking of the very first Marvel Studios special presentation, we wanted to create that same sense of fun and maybe excitement around something that was unique and unexpected. So we decided that we were going to look at Werewolf by Night as one of the characters that we had long wanted to put somewhere in the MCU, but hadn't figured out the right spot. And the opportunity to dip in for a shorter presentation that would allow us to introduce this character, see the world from his perspective, and maybe uncover a new part of the MCU felt like just the right thing to kick off our first special presentation. Michael Giacchino has been a longtime collaborator with Marvel Studios, composing many of our wonderful and memorable scores. And he had approached us because he was interested in directing. And we said, Michael, you're great. Let's do it. And so one of the things that we had talked to him about was, okay, when we're directing, what kind of aspect or qualities do you want to bring to it? And Michael's knowledge of film, TV, video games, and all these mediums that he's worked in was only enhanced by his musical genius. So Michael would frequently come in and bring in samples of music. This is how we want the scene to feel, and this is what we want to achieve. And it works so well because music is a universal language and very emotional, and it's very easy to get the entire cast and crew on board when you hear a piece of music and you understand what type of emotion we're going for in a scene. Michael has been a consummate collaborator, and I've enjoyed every minute working with him. And I can't wait to figure out a way to see where these characters might go next and what sort of ideas Michael has for them. The MCU is populated with superheroes, aliens, alternate dimensions, space travel, all these wonderful, fantastical concepts. But we've thought to ourselves, there must be another corner of the MCU that we have yet to explore. And this special, Werewolf by Night, allows us to take a look in sort of the shadows and the darker areas. You start to learn about the secret cabal of monster hunters, and they've been doing this, or their brethren, for centuries. Monsters have always existed, but now, for whatever reason, they're just coming out to the fore. And so we took this opportunity to use the special presentation format to introduce this concept to the MCU, let people get a taste of what it's like to interact with the monsters of the MCU, and then from here, who knows where it goes. It's always exciting to introduce new characters into the MCU. And with Werewolf by Night, we've opened it up to introduce the concept that monsters may be walking and living among us. You might not be able to see them, you might be able to tell who's who, but they're out there. And so with this in mind, where these monsters will show up, we're not entirely sure. But it is known that in the MCU, it's big and vast, and suddenly monsters are here. When we set out to make Werewolf by Night, we started looking at movies that would have inspired us. And those included movies like The Mummy and Wolfman and The Invisible Man, which are all these great classic horror pictures from the 1930s and 1940s. And not only did we love them, but we loved the look and style and feel. So in telling a monster story, we thought it would be great to pay our respects and to sort of take some of our favorite parts about those movies and bring them up into the modern MCU. So we chose to have this screened in black and white. We put in the sort of film grain that you'd find if it was on an old piece of film that you had pulled out of someone's back archive. As you'll notice, there are reel changes on a second watch. You might even notice when the reel would flip over, when they would have to do that in an old picture house. And so all of this is our way of saying it's a love letter to these classic horror and monster movies, the 1930s and 1940s. In taking inspiration from the monster movies of the 1930s and 40s, those productions often had to build everything in camera or use movie magic to give you that sense of the supernatural. So when we set out to shoot Werewolf by Night, we knew that we wanted to include more practical effects and more real-life elements to build as much as we could to capture it in camera, not only to give that sense of it being real on screen, but also to allow our actors to have something tangible to play off of. And in particular, the incredible work was done by the team to create a prosthetic and practical werewolf. So when you see that werewolf and that monster shows up in the third act, that is a full-on prosthetic suit with incredible work done by our makeup artists, by our prosthetic team, by our hair group as they individually put in all the werewolf hair all over his body. And it made it so much more human to see that character show a little bit of the humanity and be able to act, but also have the physicality that comes with being a ferocious werewolf. When audiences tune in on Disney Plus to watch Werewolf by Night, they should expect to see something that's a little bit scary, a little bit fun, and a little bit exciting. The tension of being thrust into a new world with dangerous characters is part of what makes the special so exciting, but also just enough where you're a little bit scared, but you're still leaning forward in your seat. So expect to have a little bit of the traditional Marvel fun, but a little bit something scarier and perhaps maybe a little ferocious than you otherwise would have expected.